Sex and sexuality in the human race. Everyone knows superficially how sex and sexuality works. Never has such a subject been more done to death, as you might say, than this one, which has been from the times past forever the subject of conjecture. People who are alive and living in the physical world simply cannot know the whole real truth about sex. I feel this is particularly important at the moment, as the powers that be in the media seem to be making everything just abominable, and the majority of us are shocked rigid by it. And the thing that's really more upsetting is how much they're upsetting our children. As we have said already, we have no intention whatsoever of leaving this world's humanity in any doubt of what the real truth is, but we shall explain why it is that religions, which are to a certain extent guided by unseen hands, speak constantly of virginity and of the desirability of purity in females, but never in males, and of the total undesirability of divorce and adultery. Everyone knows what radiance comes on the face of those who are lucky enough to find exactly the right person, and how those people seem to be positively glowing with happiness, which continues throughout their lives, only to be replaced with the saddest sickness if the person who gave them this radiance is taken away from them. Sometimes, sadly, the bereft person will even try to end their lives in the hope of joining their loved ones once again, as life alone has ceased to have any further meaning for them. All of life everywhere in this universe, on whatever structure it may be, everything is powered by one or another form of electricity, and this is the whole basis of life, and the whole basis of the universe itself, and the way that it is run, and the way that everything runs constantly. We too, all of us, the creatures that are created within it, are all created by this electricity. The basic essence of the human person, which dwells within the brain, the mind, the very person who lives in the destructible shell of the human body, is a mass, a tangle of such complicated electrical signals that no one can possibly completely understand it in any way whatsoever. But it is known, and is becoming known, that the human brain gives off certain signals. And now in the modern world you have equipment to discover this fact for yourselves, and to ascertain on which sort of frequency each individual lives, and for that matter will do forever, because he or she belongs on that particular frequency, and in the future everyone must know not only what blood group he or she belongs in, but on what frequency he or she works on. This will prove to be of the utmost importance. Everyone knows that it is in the male the male animal in the human being. Everyone knows that in the male animal and in the male human being, it is. I don't know what happened there. It is he, the male, who must make the thrusting movements of sex, thrusting movements which not only plant the seed, which creates new life, but which is a perfect union between two living human beings, creates something else besides, which is very different to the lower creatures, excepting perhaps some higher forms of monkey, horses and dogs, not in any other animals. Animals use their sexuality in a ritualistic way, simply for procreating, and they know this perfectly well themselves. They very rarely bother with each other, excepting only for mating and the rearing of young, which is pure instinct in all of them. Human beings, too, are guided quite definitely by instinct and intuition, as it is known and described very often, especially in their choosing of a mate. As things are in your modern world, all the old basic clans have disappeared, and all the various and different types of people are now split up forever. Young people of different types and sorts of looks must hope that in some chance meeting at the house of a friend, at a dance hall, at work, or by purest chance, he or she may meet the person they are looking for, the perfect mate, and really the quest is next door to hopeless. A young man or girl must marry someone who looks right, and as they are probably nice people in 80% of cases, their marriage is successful enough, and they have nice children and enjoy their lives. But is this the real truth? Marriage with someone else who was exactly right for each of them would bring about something very, very different indeed. I've actually, several of my patients have said to me how very sad they are about either a son or a daughter who don't want to do this internet dating and have just given up and don't bother, which is very sad, and I can completely understand that. Anyone who takes a serious look around them in any public place can see for themselves how the modern world is now composed of so many middle-aged people who are grossly overweight, sallow and old-looking, with grim, tired, bored looks on their faces. We who are dictating this message have been looking at humanity for many hundreds of years, and we can tell you that many of those who lived in previous centuries, who remained with their own families, many of whom were extremely poor and lived very humble, deprived sort of lives, working hard from dawn till dusk, that many of these people, who were married within their own clans and ate extremely simple food, often remained very much more active until extreme old age, and were in very many ways much brighter and far, far happier, without any entertainment to speak of, and very little in the way of amusement, except only that amusement that they could find from each other, and from the visits of their children, and looking after of their children, which sort of life, lived constantly with the right people, seemed to make them happy, unlike so many of those today who have met by chance, and whose only entertainment seems eventually to be the television, their mobile phone or computer, shopping, and constant overeating. You have today a very large number of people all over the civilized world, and yes, even in Russia too, and slowly the same thing is happening in China also, where once people remained together, and now their clans are being broken up and destroyed by their governments, and the wars they pursue, and the relentless push for the population to move away from their families to earn more money, to constantly increase the GDP of their countries. The result is always that many marry someone who is and remains a stranger, and you get an increase in the number of bored, miserable-looking people who become grossly overweight and discontented with their lot. This is directly the result of sex constantly with the wrong partner, and conversation which dribbles down to nothing, and children who in adult life turn after one parent or another and disagree amongst themselves, and finally go away from their families and sometimes never return, and loneliness, terrible utter loneliness, which is and must be the result. So many old people living all alone because their children do not want them, do not love them, and find their company intolerable. It's not only old age which makes some people disgusting, boring and awful to have around at the end of their lives, but all too often they have had to spend their lives with someone who bored them to death, and their sexual lives ended in early middle age. Their characters then become warped and changed, and in old age shallow and meaningless, not only to themselves but to everyone else as well. It may seem that this is an exaggeration of the truth, but we can promise you that it is not. What then in humanity is this sexual act? How many women turn away from sex once they have had their number of children they wish to have? Many men also find it a constant effort, and either find themselves someone else on the side, as it were, if they have the means, or they marry someone else, or give it up altogether by the time they are by 50. This picture is all too common and becomes more and more the case in the present modern world. As we have said in previous dictation, there can only be the one way in the modern world, and that is not only by the setting up of very new and different marriage bureaus, but of keeping of family histories, the investigation into the recent family past history, to discover where all the various members of the family have gone, and to try to get all these old clans together, and to really help people to find their true and right partners. On a scientific level, very much research must be done by those who have the means and understanding to do such research, and this requires further knowledge about the electrical systems of the body. Only assiduous work over a long period will in the end bring the truth into your medical fraternity, and bring your world to true modernity and very much greater happiness for the people that live on the physical side of this planet, and also long after their lives are over here, and on the non-physical side too, and with every chance of greater happiness in future lives. a truly modern planet with complete understanding. The key to all happiness, as all the songs that are constantly sung will tell you, is this sexuality, or love as it is called, all the time and constantly. Every male animal and male human being emits some sort of an electrical signal, and he needs to find a mate who is on a similar frequency, or at least an allied one, or he will find sex, even with the most beautiful woman, difficult, tiring, and unsatisfactory, because at the present time people are totally ignorant, and men think that perhaps failure in sex is perhaps her fault, or his fault, or perhaps he is not sexually as successful as other men who he has heard boasting of their prowess with the fair sex, as it is called. Nothing could be further from the truth. And as we're seeing on the television now, there are so many young men who are finding that they can't do it with several girls, and so they end up taking Roxon or Viagra or something, or thinking they're homosexual. How terribly sad. They just haven't been able to meet the right girl. Everyone is different, and no one can be successful in sex with just anyone who happens to look good and appeal to them visually. This is where people of the modern day are totally confused in their choice of a suitable mate. Provided he or she is good-looking, that must be the only thing they need to find in a sexual partner. Nothing could be further from the truth. From the woman's point of view, sex with a man, even if she finds him devastatingly attractive, but whose frequency is wrong for her, is also likely to be an unsatisfactory experience for her too. Even though she may produce perfectly healthy children, she will never come to true happiness with that particular partner if she cannot reach a satisfactory sexual climax, which is the ultimate of a sexual relationship. And even if she does reach an orgasm, it will result in utter exhaustion, and she needs to sleep for several hours after it to get over her union with him. Contrary to popular belief, it should not be necessary to sleep for several hours after sex. It should be possible to have sex with one's partner and feel uplifted and even exhilarated by the experience. And how rarely does this happen for those who have found their mate by pure chance somewhere, and neither of them know who they are, where they come from, or even if they might belong to any clan, as neither of them have any records of their ancestors whatsoever. This must all change. If people are to come to greater happiness in the future, all must know the real truth. But a satisfactory sexual union has a very great deal more to it than concerning life on both structures. But a satisfactory sexual union has a very great deal more to it concerning life on both structures than just to promote happiness and a sense of well-being. It is much more than this. Men from an early age are aware of their sexual needs, whereas a young woman rarely is in the same way, until she has perhaps been married or had a love affair, which has ended and is therefore deprived of a sexual relationship. Imagine the human body as if it were a complicated electrical circuit, which it is in very many ways, with the nucleus of that circuit, the main powerhouse, the brain, from which all energy springs, all instructions and all power comes. This is how the body is powered. Imagine this, and imagine that a sexual union is taking place. Imagine two people who are perfectly attuned to each other electrically during this sexual union. They promote power together, and the result is that they are both given a shot of power, which helps them to go about their lives totally invigorated, which is a very, very different thing altogether. After life is over, such people go on with the sexual unions that they enjoyed during their physical lifetimes. They rarely find anyone else, unless the partner they lived their last lifetime with has gone to another life, and they find an old lover from the same clan with whom they can once more find happiness and rekindle a former love that they have known together. On the rest plane, sexual union between two absolutely suited people is even more important than it is on this structure, because it is the only way that these non-decaying bodies can be rejuvenated. Otherwise, they begin to deteriorate very much more quickly until that person must be stored away, as we have discussed already. People on the physical structure also really do, in the main, live longer if they are very happily married. Some do not. but that is because they are not very healthy in the first place. We have already mentioned that the structure of humanity also, even given the right structure of two people, this electrical frequency that people run on, is the most important factor between two people that are right for each other. At this juncture, I appear to be missing a page in this chapter. If I find it, I will insert it at a later date. However, I am quite capable of explaining the Mrs. Knowledge myself. People whose bodies work on a similar electrical frequency not only have satisfactory sex lives, but they also have similar brain patterns and think alike. How wonderful to live your life with someone who approaches life from a similar aspect to your own, who on getting into the car together after leaving some event or other, one of you says what the other was thinking. So many of us today have bodies that are not only multiracial, but are also combinations of generations of people who have married each other with nothing in common and whose bodies work on totally different frequencies. Consequently, we have a population of people who are beset with all manner of health problems caused by bodies that are composed of organ systems which cannot function efficiently on the electrical frequency of the body they are in. It says in one of my acupuncture textbooks, all the organs must be able to submit to the heart. The heart, after all, is your motor and must, with your brain, set the frequency on which your body functions. People suffer with all sorts of digestive problems, gynecological problems, asthma and bronchial problems, blood problems, eczema and psoriasis, dyslexia of all sorts. The list is endless. If we were all given knowledge to help us find the right person to go through life, we would in time breed these troublesome health problems out of our population. I remember listening to something on Radio 4, and certainly, even in my mother's youth, women really had very little choice, but they had to marry someone, otherwise they didn't have much. There was very little work for women to do, other than being a nurse, a teacher, or a secretary, or a cleaner. So a lot of women married a man who wanted them. There wasn't much choice. And there was a bit about a Victorian woman who they'd read a letter where she'd said that if only she could find a man who had a good income and would be kind to her and didn't smell. She didn't have much of an ambition, did she? Anyway, I don't know whether she ever found him. Dictation continues. Women who prostitute themselves are not fit mates for any man, and really prostitution is and must be the worst possible sort of trade which anyone was ever engaged in. For innocent girls of the past who have literally been forced into such a trade, very special healing and curative processes have been used to help them, by the request of their families that love them. But for others, no such privileges are ever accorded. Many girls of today, in complete and utter ignorance, have become very little better than loose women of the past, who were paid for their favours. Girls of today not only receive no pay, but very many of them have already destroyed themselves in the eyes of the authorities here. One thing that will and shall be given to the world is the truth about the strict rules that govern this universe. Once humanity descends into the utmost base behaviour, once it behaves in a manner which even animals would shun, once it loses all sense of morality and regard for its fellows, then it is really heading for its own destruction. The whole basis of humanity is love. The old religious codes which tried to teach morality, goodness, honour, kindness, and complete and utter consideration for others was not nonsense. It was and is the only code of behaviour for humanity. Because once this is lost, then humanity will and must destroy itself. It can only be a matter of time. The real truth about the laws that govern humanity, the fact that everyone is watched in some way, must be revealed to humanity via this book. This we intend to do with help that we have received from this lady, but others who will give their help also. I wonder what sort of fate people like George Soros, what's that man, the American who's just died, who was pretty ghastly, and also Jacob Rothschild. I wonder, for they've left, naked we come into the world and naked we go out. And I wonder what terrible future lives they will have have to live to pay for that. Kissinger was the other man I was thinking of. They all died in their 90s, but all created a lot of evil in this world. The real truth about the laws that govern humanity, the fact that everyone is watched in some way, must be revealed to humanity via this book. This we intend to do, with help that we have received from this lady, but others will give their help also. Humanity must learn to work all the time together and for each other, as we shall so indicate. And a humanity which in its private life is absolutely happy is better fitted to tackle the terrible problems that face this planet. Girls and young men who simply believe that sex is nothing very much more than a physical exercise which satisfies a need are extremely ignorant and have no idea of the harm that they do to themselves. On the purely physical side, a very small girl who has sex with all sorts of different men, some of whom have a penis which is much too large for her vagina, will almost certainly eventually have to have all her sexual organs removed in later life. She may become barren or worse, as she has had too much of a strain placed on this very delicate and magical area of the human body. But simply girls who have had sex with very many different men, submitting their electrical circuits, if you like, to a very tremendous strain, and this not only ages them very much more quickly, especially after the age of 30 or so, but it also has a deteriorating effect upon the vital brain cells and other parts of their very complicated body, and this extends to other structures of the body also. It must be obvious that as the other structured body, or the non-living side of the planet, cannot be created without the sexual union in the physical world to create the physical body, that the two bodies must be synonymous both with each other, one with the other, and some of the damage which is done to the physical body also has its effect on the non-living body also, which on its own structure is very much the same as the physical body here, with a nervous system, muscles, bones and blood of a very different sort, and a brain cavity exactly the same as on the physical structure. Girls who become prostitutes almost always destroy themselves altogether. That is to say, their nervous systems are so damaged by the time they come to the rest planes that they are almost always given a very special type of treatment which pre-programs them, and they are thereafter returned to the animal kingdom to try to work their way forward once again. Such disgust is felt for such women who so demean themselves, even if they are so poor that they feel themselves forced into such a course to make money, that very little concern is felt for them here. In another dictation it says that sometimes these women are returned as men, but men with no talents and no anything, just the very basics. My comment. As I mentioned at the beginning originally, there was a plan to give this knowledge to us through the church. However, not everyone agreed and did not want this to be a religious message. It was felt that today we need knowledge and not dogma. In any case, those in the church, for the most part, are politicians, and as much as those in Parliament, and were not interested. My mother did consult many in the church about her message and met with general indifference, most universally. But despite the original plan being shelved, there is much information in the original writing that I think is worth including. I must also mention that although in the early 1970s, when all this began, one never really considered that men would work as prostitutes, although I am sure it was going on, neither was there much mention of homosexuality as it was still illegal. And in any case, sex and sexual matters were rarely touched upon except in the fairy tale aspect in films and novels. But it must be said that men also harm themselves by misusing the physical act, and it is immediately apparent to all if a man or a woman is homosexual. There are many reasons which I will go into in another chapter, but none of us are just our sexuality. So many of us are magnificent in so many ways, but sex is such a vital part of us and causes so much distress and unhappiness that we need to understand why. So very many people ruin themselves by misusing sex, as it is part of the life force. So further to this is a little dictation about procreation. This comes from October 1975, procreation.